Yes, it's okay. The COVID pandemic is under a little bit control now when compared in previous days, but we are again looking for the other pandemics, everything, problems, chaos, because every day something happens. And nowadays wildfires are everywhere exploiting, and it's very difficult. I don't know what will happen. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. So there's lots of stories happening, lots of contradictory stories. And when I watch the news in English, I hear different stories compared with when I hear the news on Sky TV in Punjabi, for example. And I'm sure, you know, maybe when you listen to the news in Turkish, it's different to the news that you hear in English. And so different languages create different stories, don't they?
Different interpretations, I think. Interpretation is very important.
That's
because,
right.
Yeah, we create meaning.
And point of view, you know, like our interpretation based on our point of view. We might be in the same location, but if we are looking at things from using a different language, you know, because you've just explained things to me in a way like, you know, attaching it with the French bourgeois, and, you know, and it's like when we kind of shift our perception to something both known and unknown, it shifts the perception, it shifts the story, basically, doesn't it?
Yeah. You are very right. And communication is like this because we are all living creatures and we are interpreting. And you are sending me a message, but I can receive it in a different way, and you can send it in a different way, and all distortions come together, and at the end, stories change, unfortunately.
And if I tell you a story, like for example, if I tell you my story, I might have a very different meaning to that story to the meaning that you receive, you know. And so whose story is it? Is it the story of the person who's telling it, or is it the story of the person who's interpreting it?
Yeah. It's very complicated and chaotic to understand the meaning, and culture is affecting, context is affecting behind the stories, and everything comes together. And at the end, I can understand something different, and you can say another meaning, but the mutual point is important here, and I will mention it in my interview, if you can allow. And did we start to make our interview, or really? Okay.
Yeah, and, it's a conversation. You see.
Okay.
So it's very informal, and so this is like, so just you can lead the conversation in any which way you like. But
Okay then. Yes, it's very important. Then I can tell something about my understanding of stories and also their meanings and culture in it. I'm a political scientist in my undergrad degree, and also I had a master's degree on communication. And then finally, I had my doctorate degree on educational sciences, and I can see the very wide picture at once, and it's very important to take the things in a whole body. I think it's very beneficial for me, and I wrote my thesis on post-truth era and arts-based learning in leadership, because arts is very important, and we are living in a post-truth era because fake news is everywhere, and we are always exposed to news bombardments, and news are coming to us, and this can be fake or real, or what is real we don't know nowadays, and it's all complicated, and humankind needs some meaning making, some values inside of it, because this complexity makes us tired, very much tired.
Yeah, this whole thing about what is fake news and what is true news, well, it depends on, you know, perspective very often, doesn't it? You know, because I was born in Punjab, and you probably know that India was colonized for a couple of 100 years, and with the education that we received through colonization and post-colonization, a lot of the education that existed already in India, the British said, well, that's wrong because it didn't fit in with what the Bible said was correct. And so they distorted, they reshaped, they remolded our education system based on their version of what was truth, you know, based on the Bible and based on scientific knowledge, which a lot of that scientific knowledge has been disproved. And
you're exactly right. Yeah.
So what is fake then?
What is fake? Yeah, I searched for it and I was thinking like you, but some news are intentionally distorted. Some are unintentionally distorted because we interpret some news inside of us, and tellers are interpreting according to their own context and their own knowledge. But some news are intentionally given in a fake manner.
That's and right. That's the power of stories to manipulate, isn't it? So
yes.
So those stories, the fake news stories, those stories are being used very powerfully to manipulate people, to manipulate behavior.
Yes, that's right. And politicians and in politics and also in marketing area, they are used very often because they are trying to manipulate the people and make some speculations, and they are throwing this fake news inside of the society in order to make them behave according to their ends, or make them push towards their ends or aims. And these are used very intentionally, and this is because of the power of new media, because social media is everywhere now. New media, social media, which we are saying, and everyone is connected to each other, and we cannot understand these fake news are intentionally made or not, because it's going all around the world, and everyone shapes it, and everyone shares something in it, and it's becoming very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays,
to this thing of, you know, with social media, we can see how we're interconnected, and the question about identities, because the stories, we interpret those stories based on our identities, and stories can reshape our identities, and we will relate to those stories that fit in with our existing identities. And I know that the friends that I have from Turkey, like they have a very strong sense of identity in terms of being Turkish and being very attached to the land, and that even if they live in Britain for a long time, they still are attached to the identity of being Turkish, you know, that they will not call themselves British, they'll call themselves Turkish. And so it's that strong identity, and we find stories that will support that identity. And you know, so what's your opinion about that?
As an arts-based pedagogy researcher, I am working on it, and stories and as arts pieces, stories as arts pieces, because the other arts pieces are like this, are imaginative, and they are reflecting the identity of the person in storytelling. And also the collective stories, if we take into attention, collective stories are very important, because we are making these stories all together, and we are the part of these stories, and we feel an connectedness and belongingness to these stories and to this identity. It's connecting us, and it's very important nowadays, because the world is becoming chaotic, paradoxical, and ambiguous nowadays, the current times. And we need something to believe in, to trust. And we are connecting through stories, and we are coming together, and leaders are using. That's why it is becoming much more popular in leadership studies, storytelling, because they are trying to create a story and connect all the people together in this story.
It's interesting what you say, because for the past 20 years, I've been teaching leadership and management. And because I'm based in Britain, and most of the literature that's available to me about leadership and management on the MBA courses that I work on, it's mostly Eurocentric literature.
Yeah.
And so leadership, the leadership role models tend to be European or American. And when we don't see ourselves reflected in those stories, it's as though we're like extras. It's as though we're not the protagonists, we are the extras. And so I for a few years now, I've been kind of quite concerned about how we're educating people for the modern age if we're only giving them, you know, this fragmented version of reality in terms of what leadership looks like.
You are very right, and I am giving also in here now and generally leadership training courses or leadership development programs. I am preparing, and I'm trying to make it connected to the identity of the leaders or the managers, as well as making this. I am using universal values because they are universal. They belong to everyone. They are coming from East and West. For example, I took creativity from a paradoxical viewpoint because it's a universal thing, but we forget about it. Mind and soul, duality, for example. We should see the paradoxes together and we connect them together and see the creativity in this point.
Like a synthesis, and I think I've also heard it referred to as the nexus effect. You know, the nexus effect is like, they talk about the nexus effect in boundary spanning leadership. Boundary spanning leadership, it's when you lead, like, not you're in isolation, but you lead in a holistic way. You know, very often in an organization, you'll have the leader for finance, you'll have the leader for human resources, you'll have the leader for marketing, whatever. But a boundary spanning leadership is when you bring all of these elements, fragmented elements together, and you create that nexus effect because you create that space, which in my view, I call it a bridge. You know, like when I'm having a conversation with you, we're building a bridge, you know, in the communication forms a bridge. I'm learning about your thoughts and your perspective and sharing my own. When you talk about universal values, what exactly do you mean by universal values?
Yeah, for example, saving nature. For example, peace. Universal values are all together. And complexity, duality is another universal value, I think. Unity and separation are together. For example, in Roman Empire, I will give a story to you. For example, a Roman god, Janus. Do you know Janus?
Yes.
Roman god, very old one, the beginning of the Roman Empire. Has two faces, looking inside and outside in order to save the temples from both sides. And also we have a yin-yang philosophy in China, and also we have life of tree in shamanic views and also Turkic views. These are all showing the duality in thinking. Becoming together, all contracting points are becoming together, and we are getting the unifying area of everything. For example, black and white, good and evil, all are together, and this is the universal value, one of the universal values of humankind, and we should take the issues all together. And the problem comes from separation of science and arts, because science has been seen very serious, very rational, but arts has been put back. And we couldn't see this two paradoxical thing, two contracting thing together. And we broke the balance, I think, balance of the nature, universal values and universal balance of the nature. And this is why we are seeing this problems. We are facing this complexity, chaos, and everything. We should think from the universal values, and these universal values comes from both mind and body, both arts and science. We should see them all together. And I'm trying to show this to leaders, especially teachers, and show this reality to them. I don't know if I can say tell or not.
I suppose that before, you know, in the past, storytelling as a way of educating people was considered to be like one of the most important ways for learning. Is like through we learned through the stories that our teachers told us or our parents told us. And then with science wasn't a story. Science was a methodology.
Yeah, yeah.
And the methodology of concrete facts, and which are not subject to interpretation. A fact is a fact. so there we became kind of like went into that hemisphere of like, either you have the correct answer or you don't have the correct answer, because hydrogen and oxygen, you know, H2O is water. Either you know that that is correct or you don't know that that is correct. There's no interpretation about it. So it's, you know, it's that reality of like the factual reality of what are we composed of? What are the, you know, we need to know the chemical, we need to know the names in order to communicate. We need to know the formulas, I suppose, in order to make interpretations. Whereas in a story, it's malleable, it's not concrete, it's not absolute, it's not unchanging like the facts. Well, you know, the if you plant a seed and don't give it any water, it's not going to grow. You know, that is a fact. Whereas with a story, we can change things with facts. With science, it's meant to be objective, isn't it? So it's this objective versus subjective realities.
I looked at it also. The objective realities are becoming subjective nowadays. Do you think like this? Yes.
Yeah, with quantum physics.
Yeah.
Made us shift the paradigms, because you know that demonstrates in a scientific way that when the seer is not there, the protons and the neutrons, they behave in different ways when the observer is not observing.
And all this postmodern look came from this area, subjective thinking, and they are believing that in science or architect or other areas, they are believing that not all the things are concrete, not ever changing. And this is why I am saying post-truth, because truth becomes very changeable, becomes very depending on other variables. For example, I am using a statistics as a scientist, but I am not using yours. I am using the other ones. Why? Because he's defending another thing, and I am taking the science from this point. Then science is not a concrete thing, and it can be changeable in time, I think. The beginning of the world in history changed after some findings in our country. I don't know if you know or not, the beginning of the humankind changed, the beliefs about beginning of humankind. And this is why I am believing that I'm imitating the things like it's a concrete one. Okay, we know water belongs to some chemicals, but we can add some points on it, and this is the creativity and innovation. And when creativity and innovation comes into the point, we should need imagination. And arts and science should be together, like yin and yang, and like a life tree going towards sky and down to the soil. This should be connected, and we should use our concrete knowledge and also our imaginative knowledge, because there are two kinds of thinking. Art thinking is depending on imagination, and science thinking is depending on rationality. we should use them together. Otherwise, we will stuck into some knowledge, and then we will not improve ourselves. In order to improve ourselves, we need art, we need stories, we need our imagination, and we need the empathy in our stories in order to understand the others and the other one in our society.
Yeah, I mean, people like Leonardo da Vinci, he was both a scientist and an artist, wasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose
Maybe,
that empathy comes from stories, as you say, and without that empathy, hard facts can be, some people, maybe like some of the things that we have invented without empathy have turned out to be quite destructive in the long run, because they were just built on logic rather than, you know, the imagination, which included you know, like,
and logic is very linear because we put knowledge on it, and it's the linear type of knowledge because accumulation creates something more. But if we use arts and arts effects, like stories are the most important part of this arts effect, when we use them, we broke this linear system and we add something more in it. This complexity needs this because we cannot see this complexity in a linear thinking. This is why science is not enough to define the things happening around us. Because tomorrow we cannot know something happens, or we cannot know where this pandemic comes from, because it's too complicated. We cannot understand where it comes, where it goes, and where will it go. Because everything is very inside of other thing, and we are going in a chaotic environment.
That's right. It's the complexity, isn't it? And I think stories are much better at handling complexity rather than linear thinking.
Yeah, that's right. This is why nowadays leaders use stories, because stories opens up our imagination. And when we say story, there are two kinds of story usage in art-space pedagogy. We can create stories, make participants or make people create stories, or we can make people exposed to these stories. Read these stories, can be read or can be read or can be listened. When we create a story, we reflect our values to the others. It's very important. If it is personal, we reflect our inner values, and we we get face to face to ourselves. It is when it is collective, we reflect the societies, the community's values all together. We build up them all together. It's very important. When we expose to stories, read the stories are listened or read, we collectively understand the emotions of other people. And we create the connections, we increase the connections inside of our brains, neuron connections, you know. And these connections, when increased in empathy, in collaboration, we become more creative, more empathic, and more communicative to live all together. And it's very important thing, because we should be socially sensitive to the others, and we should be empathic to the others in this chaotic world, and we should be creative to solve the problems which appears every day.
I suppose that being able to speak more than one language, like you obviously can, you are fluent in English, you're fluent in Turkish and maybe other languages. And I suppose this versatility, this linguistic versatility, is also an added dimension, isn't it? Because it enables you to think in a different way and to appreciate things. You know, I think immediately when you're shifting from Turkish to English, it's like you can see different perspectives just from that position.
Yeah, of course, the words we are using defines our way and defines our perspective, shows our perspective. And it is very important to be a multi-language person, because I can understand the culture of other people and I can transform it into my language. I make it in my daily life very often because I am taking the words. For example, when I say my name, I used bourgeois name. It's a French word, and I'm using this. And also, I am getting another Turkish word in order to in order to show this French word. And I am connecting these languages and these cultures together. It's very important, and knowing from the stories of other people, other cultures are important, because if we know only our stories or our culture, because culture means the story of a people, of a nation. And if we know only our stories, we will look at the world in a restricted point of view. And we, as much as we know, we will be opening up our vision, opening up our perspectives in other eyes of the people, I think.
And I think that Turkey has a very long history, and you have, a rich culture of stories that you're told. And then when people are immigrants, they're brought up in a country where the dominant, the predominant culture is not reflecting their stories. We can become isolated from our lineage, and it's that isolation. It's almost as though being, like somebody's cut off your hair, Samson's hair, and your power is lost because you've lost that lineage of rich stories that are your own stories, and so there is a danger in only being absorbed with our own stories, and there's also a danger in being absorbed only in other people's stories.
Yeah, cultural invasion. Other means. Yes, nowadays we are facing this kind of problems because Syrians are coming, Afghans are coming to our country, and nowadays, actually currently, we are facing some fights between our natives and the newcomers. These are, I think, this should be regulated by the nation, by the state's regulations, because it's very important to make them live together, because they are running away from their homes, and we should be welcome to them. We should be very hospitable to them. But the regulations are important to put the borders inside of the people. Because there are no borders inside of these areas, and some fights are happening nowadays, physical fights, unfortunately. It's a big problem. It's the culture problem. Maybe we can, through arts, it's very important. Maybe we can tell the stories of each other, to tell the stories of ourselves to each other. And we can show that we are humankind like them. We have universal values, mutual universal values, but we have another background, because we are taking this background with us. And the other people can understand this through stories, because if they don't know your story, they cannot understand you, they cannot create an empathy towards you. And it's very important to use arts nowadays. In a project in our university, Boğaziçi University, I am using this kind of a arts effect, and the refugees, we are working on refugees, Syrian refugees mostly, and we are taking their stories, entrepreneurship stories in Turkey, and we are trying to open the minds of welcoming the refugees. Because if we don't accept this idea, we will be very offensive, we will be very angry towards them. And if we learn about their stories, learn about their, I don't know, pains or other happinesses, it's very important, because we are feeling them when we listen to their stories. And we can understand each other very well. Stories are very important in our new world. They were important already, but nowadays they are increasing their value in time, I think, and we will see their function also in the future.
I suppose stories can humanize people, can't they? Especially if they tell their own stories. So if you're telling stories about the refugees, that can be patronizing very often because it's, you know, projecting, you know, your own values on them. But if you allow the space for people to tell their own stories, then that can be very empowering for them. And also it creates like a sincere empathy, I suppose, in seeing that person as a human being rather than somebody who is where they don't belong, I suppose.
Yeah. And they know they are similar in universal values or mutual values, and they know they are not similar in different values, and they will understand this and they will feel this in their hearts. Because stories are given with emotions, not as a logical thing or methodology. Science gives it very directly, but stories makes it very valuable, very meaningful, very, I don't know, emotional ways. And it's very important to communicate in this kind of emotional ways nowadays.
So I suppose in terms of like what is mysterious about the relationship between creativity and stories, and when we talk about cultural hegemony, like that is the dominant culture, you know, which has a bigger story. In the case there in Turkey, you have a long lineage of power and, you know,
the Ottoman Empire,
right.
and also, yes.
And then you have refugees coming into the country. Well, those refugees may feel that they are refugees, so they're inevitably going to be oppressed wherever they go. But when there is this kind of strong culture, and their cultures also are strong where they work, you know, they also have a very rich culture, but that rich culture has been broken, I suppose, for at least temporarily broken, because they now find themselves re-establishing. So it's that tree that has been uprooted and it has to try and re-establish itself in a foreign land. And sometimes the stronger that tree is when it was uprooted, the longer it takes for it to, you know, integrate into its new environment.
Yeah, roots are going down. Yes, they're becoming more and more stronger in time, and the interaction is important here because they are coming together, and a new culture appears. There are no pure cultures because we are living together and we are in an interaction, and we are related to each other, and we are affected from each other. And also our cultures are not pure or unique. They are all connected and they are all changing. Nothing is staying as it is. This is so, and also the stories are important to become creative in this area. Because when we see the others and other story, we can understand them and we can create new ways of living. For example, Syrians are telling their own stories, and our Turkish people understand that, and they try to make new entrepreneurship opportunities together. We are becoming more creative, more open-minded, and when we understand each other and when we see the others not like others, it becomes much more peaceful and much more creative, much more livable, I think.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah. Excellent. That's a beautiful point too. I think it's when the other becomes us.
Yeah. Yes, other becomes us is very important. Nowadays, unfortunately, our people see them as others because our regulations are protecting the refugees, but we have extra regulations for our natives, and they are showing reaction for this. And the state's role is very important here. There should be all connecting and all friendful, I don't know, policies and other percussions, I don't know. And there should be a peaceful environment at the end.
So I suppose that kind of goes to show that a story needs to live within a structure. You know, you talk about policies and boundaries and, you know, that, so the story, for that story to evolve in the same way that when we go to a film set, you know, there are boundaries, there are limitations, that story exists within these parameters. And so that structure is like those cold facts, you know, the logic. And the logic gives a space within which the imagination can flourish.
Yes, logic is needed, but not enough. We should make it complicated with some imaginative parts, because logic and imagination should be together in order to improve.
Yeah.
Maybe, yes, but logic, a kind of logic is very required and very important to create a livable world. You are very right.
Like most stories, you know, you start with like a beginning and then you tell like the journey and then you have an ending. And so there is that logical structure to it. You know, if we started kind of in a chaotic way, like telling us some information that has nothing to do with like the main character, perhaps, you know, it's like, so, you know, even a story which is imaginative and improvised usually has
There's a logic behind it. Yes,
visible
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And also I am using Hero's Journey. I don't know, do you know Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey? In order to, yeah. And in my lectures I am giving and using it because learning happens in transformation, and in Hero's Journey we are facing difficulties, everything, and learning happens and we are transformed to another us. Every day, every moment. For example, I am talking to you and I learned something more and I am transformed in another person after this, I think, interview.
Absolutely, yeah.
We are always transforming, and transformation goes on in our lives.
Because you may have said something which will trigger an idea maybe tomorrow or the day after. So something, there's a stimulus, you know, like something that you have said will act as a stimulus for other things to emerge, which I'm not even aware of at this point in time.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Okay, brilliant. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. And I will speak with you soon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Casper.
Yeah, Dr.